With Captain Marvel opening strong in its first weekend, I'm pretty sure many of you have already seen the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, stop watching this video right now as we will be discussing major details of the movie that could be spoilers for those who have not seen it. Fair warning. If you've already seen the movie, watch on as we discuss 10 things you might have missed while watching the Captain Marvel movie. Number 1, the Quinjet. If you've noticed something very familiar with that jet that Captain Marvel and Nick Fury go fly out in the desert, it kind of looks like a vehicle that the Avengers have used. And that's because this is the beginnings of the Quinjet, which we've already seen in some of the Avengers films and Captain America films. This could have been the prototype that Nick Fury used to develop the now iconic Quinjet, mode of transportation, interstellar or interorbital transport for the Avengers. Number 2 is the CD-ROM. Believe it or not, kids, back in the 90s and early part of 2000s, this was how data was stored and transported from one computer to another before the advent of the USB drive. It was a plastic 5-inch disc that had a bit of aluminum, and we used a laser or an optical sensor to encrypt or to encode data and read off data off of that thing. And that was used when Talos wanted to show Captain Marvel what really happened during that fateful day as she got her powers and abilities, and it was recorded in the prototype jet's black box, which stored it in a device or a storage unit called a CD or CD-ROM, read-only memory compact. If you've seen laptops that have it, some laptops were fitted with CD-ROMs right before the USB drive became more popular. Number 3, 2 Kree characters that you're probably thinking were quite familiar. The first one is Ronan the Accuser. If he looks familiar, that's because we've already seen him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. The Accusers were sort of the infantry, the cavalry that really stomped the Kree authority over other civilizations. And back then, he wasn't as scary or sketchy as he looked in Guardians of the Galaxy. Another character who I wanted to talk about that was also part of the Kree Empire was Korath the Pursuer. Now, before he became the Pursuer, or sort of a bounty hunter hunting down Peter Quill, he was part of the team of Carol Danvers and Yon-Rogg as one of the members of the Star Corps. And he was probably a good guy back then. But knowing what we know, it was sort of a little bit predictable that the Kree were going to be the bad guys in the movie, knowing that both Ronan and Korath were on the side of the Kree. Number 4, Project Pegasus or Pegasus. If you remember in the movie, Mar-Vell developed jets, her prototypes, in a facility called Pegasus. Now, Pegasus might sound familiar, and that's because the facility has already appeared in other Marvel movies. The first one, if you remember, there was a hint of Project Pegasus in Iron Man 2 as Tony Stark was opening a crate to test out some material. But it was prominently shown in the first Avengers movie where Eric Selvig was actually doing some tests on the Tesseract. And we all know how that ended, with our good buddy Loki coming in, claiming the Tesseract, and putting an end, destroying the facility. In at number 5 is Monica Rambeau. If you remember in the movie, Carol's best friend was Maria Rambeau. And if you look closely at her necklace spells out the name Monica. And that's because Monica is Maria Rambeau's daughter in the Captain Marvel movie. And if you remember who Monica Rambeau is in the comic books, She is another superpowered individual or character in the Marvel Universe who is able to turn her body into any form of energy along the electromagnetic spectrum, giving her the moniker of Photon and Spectrum. And at one point in her career, she was Captain Marvel. She was a member of the Avengers and, until recently, a superpowered group called the Ultimates, where Captain Marvel Carol Danvers was also a member of. I'm sure it will be very interesting to see and follow how the Marvel Cinematic Universe will use this subplot of Spectrum and probably introduce her later on in future Captain Marvel movies. At number 6, Nick Fury's eye. If you remember, in Captain America the Winter Soldier, he had a line. He told somebody that he trusted once in his past. He trusted once before, and it cost him an eye. And in Captain Marvel, it is finally revealed that he did lose his eye by trusting too much an alien creature called a flurkin, which looks like a normal house cat on Earth. And if you read the comic books, a flurkin is a very dangerous alien species that looks like a cat, but once it opens its mouth, it's got a bunch of tentacles and big snake-like teeth that can really do damage to anybody, even superpowered beings. And Nick Fury, trusting the cat too much, was playing with it after they finished their adventure with the Kree, and the cat somehow, you know how cats are, scratches Nick Fury's eye. I thought this was unnecessary. I thought that maybe Marvel could have developed the eye as a war wound instead of an accident from a flurkin. They were trying to do comic relief for the movie with Nick Fury losing an eye to a cat, but quite honestly, I thought it was unnecessary, and thus removing that badass shadow that Nick Fury has, that was a war wound. Technically, it still is a war wound because they just came from a war between the Skrulls and the Kree, and I guess he trusted too much the cat. That's why it cost him an eye. At number 7 is Phil Coulson's loyalty. If you remember, Phil Coulson was sort of like a rookie agent for S.H.I.E.L.D. In the Captain Marvel movie, and boy, did they make him look look at how young and youthful Clark Gregg looks in this movie. But we get a lot of scenes where Nick Fury just trusts Agent Coulson so much that, you know, he would put his life on the line, trusting Phil Coulson. And we get to see in the movie that Phil, being a young rookie, does the right thing and lets Nick Fury and Carol Danvers go while the other agents were pursuing them. And I think that was a defining moment between Nick Fury and Phil Coulson. And that's how they've become best buddies in S.H.I.E.L.D. and that they trusted each other. And it'll be interesting to see how that relationship, that kind of relationship, blossomed in future Captain Marvel movies. At number 8 is Captain Marvel's name. This was the first Marvel movie I've seen where the lead character, whose name was prominently displayed and is the namesake for the movie, was never mentioned throughout the entirety of the film. Iron Man was given the moniker by the press at the end of Iron Man 1. We get to see Thor. His birth name is Thor. The Hulk in Avengers. Even Captain America was given that moniker after he rescued some prisoners of war in Germany. But in this movie, we never see or we never hear Carol Danvers being called as Captain Marvel. I thought that was interesting. I don't know if it was intentional. I'm guessing it is, because I was kind of hoping Nick Fury would somehow in the end call her Captain Marvel or Captain Marvel for some reason, but it never happened. If you recall in the comic books, it was Captain America who actually told Carol Danvers to drop the moniker Miss Marvel and take on the mantle of Captain Marvel. And Carol was hesitant because there was an actual Captain Marvel in the comic books, which she got her powers from, and she was afraid she would ruin that legacy. And Captain America, Steve Rogers, assures her that you've led the Avengers, you've saved the world, quit being an adjunct and take the mantle. And that's how the Captain Marvel moniker stuck with Carol Danvers. And I'm hoping that in the events of Avengers Endgame, somehow this scene would play out with Steve Rogers telling Carol, your name should be Captain Marvel, and you could be the new leader of the Avengers. And with Steve telling Carol to take on the Captain Marvel name and moniker, the rest, I suppose, is history. And she became one of the fiercest, most badass Avengers out there, especially in the comic books. Number 9, Captain Marvel's binary form. If you read the comic books, there was a point in her career where Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, lost her memory and a bit of her powers when Rogue, the X-Men, or the X-Man, touched her too long and absorbed her powers. Professor Xavier did his best to help Carol, and she went on an adventure in space, and the Brood tried to do some experiments on her, and she became the entity called Binary, giving her the power of a white hole or a supernova star or something like that. I was actually hoping, after watching some trailers in Captain Marvel, that we would see this ability in Carol, and this is how she would destroy the Kree who were pursuing the Skrulls. I thought it would be like a Dark Phoenix moment for her, but instead, I think Marvel tried to make the binary concept a little bit more convincing and palatable. If you remember in the movie, when she was in Freefall, I was talking to myself and saying, she does not know how to fly. And I realized the Kree in the MCU, they don't really fly. They have ships, but they don't really fly like levitation or self-propulsion. And I figured the way Marvel did it was that binary form was her way of self-propulsion. And I think it worked out great. And I think it was more believable instead of her just projecting anti-gravitons and resisting the gravitational field of certain objects. I think giving her the power of a sun would be enough to propel her and give her flight. And I thought that was a wonderful way of explaining how Captain Marvel could fly and at the same time have the powers of a sun or a star. And in the movie, I thought that she looked great. It wasn't like a Dark Phoenix look, although I wished that the fight scene, the end confrontation with Ronan and his armada, I wish it didn't look too cheesy and boring. I wish they would have kept it to kept the fight scene to a minimum and sort of made her like a Dark Phoenix, and she would have just attacked the central ship of Ronan and told him to back off because I'll destroy all your ships. But it went another way, and I thought it was a little bit boring and dull, but I hope we get to see more of that dramatic interpretation of her abilities when Endgame comes. And finally, at number 10, is Carol Danvers absorbing the engine's energy and acquiring such tremendous powers and abilities. And people were thinking, how on earth does a human being absorb that much energy and not die? My theory is, just like what we've seen in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Peter Quill was able to hold the Power Stone. Simply not because he was pure human, but because he was half celestial. And I'm guessing that Carol Danvers was not entirely human, that she could be, in reality, half Kree. Just like in the comic books, that was revealed that her biological mother was in fact Kree, making her half Kree with her father being human, and that the events that happened with Marvel not only gave her powers, but also unlocked her latent abilities because she was already Kree to begin with. And I thought this is an interesting subplot that could be further explored in future Captain Marvel movies. I thoroughly enjoyed this secret origin story arc in the comic books, and I thought maybe the Marvel Cinematic Universe could adapt it in a sequel to the Captain Marvel movie. So there you go, folks. Those are my 10 things that I felt you might have missed while watching the Captain Marvel movie. If you felt there are other Easter eggs or other things that should have been discussed in this video, please feel free to write them down in the comment section below. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video discussion on certain Easter eggs and themes discussed in the Captain Marvel movie. Until next time, thanks for watching.